When I get sad, I stop being sad, and I start being awesome. Barney Stinson, ladies and gentlemen. Now, Richey, why are you talking about How I Met Your Mother? The reason being is because Barney Stinson exudes awesomeness, and I'm about to talk to you about someone else who exuded awesomeness. One of the most awesome people who ever walked the earth, and that someone is Peter the Great, Tsar of Russia. And you're about to see what I'm talking about. I mean, I'm really excited about this because, if you're ever thinking about just sitting there and doing nothing, it really helps to think about somebody who accomplished something with their life. And this guy most certainly did. Now, Peter the Great lived from 1672 to 1725, and in this relatively brief span of time became one of the most influential monarchs in European history. And we can remember Peter the Great with the letter W, kind of like Sesame Street. This lecture is brought to you by the letter W. Now, two things, or three things, depending on how you want to look at it. First of all, Westernization. That Russia is, when it comes to where it is culturally, it's kind of not a girl, not yet a woman, or something like that. That it's in Asia, it's in Europe. Where is it? What does it mean to be Russian? And before Peter the Great, being Russian meant to be more Eastern oriented. Well, Peter takes this and goes with a more Western orientation. So first of all, Westernization is a big thing for Peter the Great. He wants to orient Russia toward Europe rather than toward Asia. And then secondly, he wants warm water ports, all right? So we've got Westernization and warm water, which you think about that, and it's like, ooh, I've got a W or something like that, right? Or is that 3, or how are you going to look at that? But anyway, however you want to look at it, Westernization, warm water ports. Warm water ports being ports that don't freeze all the time. Because this is what Russia was looking at when Peter became Tsar, just this port at Archangel, which is cold, is frozen part of the year. I think today the Russians keep submarines there or something like that, which that's cool if you want to keep submarines there nowadays, but how many submarines did Peter the Great have? 0. So really, Peter needs to think about some ports that Russia can have to make it a naval power and also to make it more of a commercial power, to make Russia a preeminent power in the world. And this is really Peter's project. So Westernization and warm water ports are both facets of this project that Peter has to make Russia into a more powerful country. Peter launched several military forms in Russia. He created a professional military force based on the Prussian model. So he's westernizing the Russian military. He even brought in General Patrick Gordon from Scotland, who was a Western general for Peter the Great's new Western army. And the first time that this army saw action was in the Azov campaign, which the Sea of Azov is right there north of the Black Sea, and Peter wants to gain a foothold here. Well, the Ottoman Empire is already in this area, which the Ottoman Empire by this time is beginning their slow decline, which will kind of wrap up with World War I. But Peter wants to control the Sea of Azov, so he goes in there. Now, first, going into the Sea of Azov, he brings a land force, and this is a failure. He tries to take a fortress at Azov with an exclusively land force. Well, Peter's not the type that like, oh man, I got defeated, I'm just gonna sulk or something like that, okay? Whenever Peter's sad, he stops being sad and he starts being awesome. And he did this with a navy, and Peter the Great returns supported by a fleet of ships, and this time he wins, and Peter gets the title Father of the Russian Navy because the guy didn't give up. He goes and tries to do it by land, and then he says, look, I'm going to get this done. And this is Peter's mentality all the time. And here is a symbol of the Russian Navy, which is just freaking cool. You got St. George at the bottom there. You've got the Russian double-headed eagle. You can't see my shirt, though. Check out my shirt. I got double eagle there. I think it's the most awesome thing ever. Yeah, I mean, it just excites me. So now the other thing, I mean, if you want to think about how backward Russia was when Peter became the Tsar, Russia didn't even have a flag at that time. And what they did was they based a flag because if you're going to have a navy, the ships have to have flags. Well, we don't have one of those. Well, what some people say happened is that the Dutch, who were one of the preeminent naval powers at the time, there was their flag. And Peter's like, you know what? We can probably just switch that around a little bit. Nobody will know the difference. Just take that red from the bottom and kind of put it up top. And that's where people say the Russian flag comes from. It's one of a few stories, but makes a lot of sense to me. Now, Peter, in his effort to orient Russia toward Europe, he went on a European tour, and this is something that young aristocrats did, but Peter spent several months in Europe and spent a lot of time in Amsterdam. All right. Okay. All right. I know you're laughing. Come on. Don't act like you're not. And then spent some time in England. Now, it's not what you think, okay? You think, oh, yeah, Peter the Great, he spent a lot of time in Amsterdam. I wonder if he's hitting up those coffee shops. Not so much. Really, what Peter was doing is he was building ships. He wanted to learn how to actually build a ship. He didn't want to just get somebody to like, hey, go over there and find out and come back and build ships. Peter was a real hands-on kind of guy, and he wants to learn how to build a ship himself from top to bottom. He would kind of masquerade as just a normal 6'7" guy, right? I mean, just, oh yeah, he's just 6'7". He's not like the Tsar of Russia or anything like that. And he built ships, but it wasn't all business. There are all kinds of stories about this European tour. Peter brought like a troop of dwarves with him. I guess that took the attention off of Peter. You know, you're looking, it's like, oh, whoa, there's that really big dude. And then it's like, little people, you know, and, you know, maybe, I don't know, but these were his friends, maybe, kind of like Santa and his elves or something like that. It's getting to be Christmas time when I'm recording this. They've got a bill that was presented to Peter for this chateau that he was staying in England, where there were paintings on the walls that had been shot out. You know, so you can just kind of imagine what was going on here. Wasn't all work, no play, necessarily. I mean, after all, Peter was Russian, right? And just another thing about Peter that I just think is just pretty great, after all, he is Peter the Great, is when he was visiting the King of England, he gave the King of England a gift. And the King of England's like, what is this? And Peter's like, you know what this is. It's a picture of me. All right, and that's the thing. It's like, it's a gift. I mean, take a picture, it'll last longer, something like that, right? Now, when Peter got back, and of course Peter had to get back because of rebellions, that sort of thing, which I'll talk about in a second, but really it's one thing for Peter to go out to Western Europe and learn about stuff over there and all of that, but when Peter comes back, he wants to westernize Russia, and he launches what some people call a cultural revolution. Here is young Peter the Great wearing a traditional Eastern caftan. You see this this thing here that's just, I mean, it doesn't look very Western European, almost looks like a Mongol or something like that. And it's time, in true Barney fashion, suit up! And you see Peter here, he is wearing Western European clothing. And that's what he wanted from all of his court and all of the influential people in Russia. He wanted them to adopt the latest European fashion. And in fact, Russians, it was cool back then to have a beard, like not like just a regular beard, but like a really, really long beard. And Peter decided that he was going to tax beards. If you want to wear a beard, great, but you're going to have to pay a tax. Now, of course, there are stories too about Peter and his courtiers that if somebody would show up wearing a beard, that he would just grab a handful and tear it out. It's like, ow! Now, as for me, I made sure to get a clean shave before doing this video because I didn't want to offend the ghost of Peter or anything like that. And you see a cartoon here with one of the people just cutting one of these guys' beards, and see that this Russian nobleman is also in like kind of a short skirt looking thing, which is more of a European fashion than these long caftans that the Russians wore. Another thing Peter wanted to do to westernize Russia was a program of education that Peter paid for the sons of Russian nobles to study abroad in Western Europe. He figured, hey, there's not much I could do with these old guys that are set in their ways, but maybe I can do something with the young people. If they can go over to Western Europe, spend a little time in Amsterdam, see how cool it is, then maybe they would come back and kind of buy into Peter's Westernization program. And remember that education is one of the barriers to an absolutist, because often the church controlled the domestic institutions of education. And another thing that Peter does is he sets the new year to start on actual New Year's. Imagine that. When Peter became Tsar, the New Year in Russia was still celebrated in September because that's when people thought the world was created. So we celebrate the New Year starting with the creation of the world. And Peter said, look, okay, this is just, we can't keep celebrating New Year's at a time when nobody else does, okay? We're going to match the calendar of Western Europe. So in 1700, he said, look, we're starting a new century. We're going to start the year at a new time, and I want there to be fireworks and cannons and all of that kind of stuff. And a day like New Year's Day is the biggest Russian holiday ever. Like, seriously, like, Russian ever invites you to a New Year's party, and you're a legal adult and all that, might want to go see, like, just kind of what they get into over there. Great food. Of course, when Peter comes back to Russia, he encounters some resistance because he's telling everybody, hey, you're doing it all wrong. The Western Europeans have it all right. You need to be more like them. Well, the more conservative elements of the elite, they didn't like this. In most countries, there is going to be some resistance to change. You look even at George Washington, who said in his farewell address, he warned Americans against what he called the insidious wiles of foreign influence, okay? Against the insidious wiles of foreign influence, the jealousy of a free people ought to be constantly awake. Don't let those foreigners influence you with all their foreign stuff, is what Washington's saying. And the Russian elite is feeling about the same way. And there are three entrenched classes. There goes that W3 again, or whatever, right? First of all, the boyars. The boyars were the Russian nobility. So just commit this word to memory. When you hear the word boyars in the context of Russia, that is the Russian nobility. And then there are the streltsy, the musketeers. These were elite military units who were really entrenched. They were, you kind of compare them maybe to the Praetorian Guard or something like that in the Roman Empire. And then finally, the Russian Orthodox Church, which was one of the most powerful and wealthiest institutions in Russia, and also among the most conservative. Well, Peter faced, when he was on his European tour, a streltsy rebellion. He's out there, and the streltsy are like, hey, let's overthrow this guy while he's out. Now, Peter gets back, and actually even before Peter gets back, this process starts, but Peter comes down hard on the streltsy. According to Voltaire, their leaders with several of their officers and priests were condemned to death. Some were broken upon the wheel, and 2 women were buried alive. Upwards of 2,000 of the streltsy were executed, part of whom were hanged around the walls of the city. Don't mess with Peter, okay? This is like, oh, hey, you know what? We're going to rebel against Peter the Great. No, thank you. And the streltsy after this were effectively disbanded, that they were never going to be strong enough to be an influence. And this is part of Peter modernizing the military. And, of course, there's General Patrick Gordon from Scotland was the general who put down this rebellion. So this anti-Western rebellion was put down by Peter's Western Scottish general. Oh, the irony. And speaking of General Gordon, I really want to tell you something about Peter the Great's humanity. That you think about, okay, people rebelled against Peter and he just started cutting off heads. Well, Peter, if you crossed him, that was one thing, but if you were loyal to him, this wasn't like a Hitler or Stalin kind of figure. Peter the Great, when General Gordon was dying, Peter would keep vigil, and he would take care of him at night. He could have gotten any number of people to take care of this guy, but for Peter, this guy has served me, this guy has been faithful to me, and I will stay up all night tending to him myself. And it said that when General Gordon died, that Peter showed up personally to close the general's eyes. And this guy, I mean, even though he could be ruthless, there was just so much humanity flowing from him. And I think that that's admirable. And more importantly, it's awesome. And then there's Peter and the church. How do we deal with the church? Now, of course, keep in mind that Peter was, just like anybody else in Russia at the time, a pious Orthodox Christian. But at the same time, Peter felt that the institutional church was too powerful, and this institutional church was fighting his Westernization program. And the Russian Orthodox Church today, as it was back then, is and was led by a patriarch. Now, the patriarch had not really supported Peter's reforms, and Peter thought, you know what, we need to do something a little different, because there's a problem having a figurehead of the church, okay? Peter wanted the Tsar to really be the only figurehead, that you don't have like one figurehead for the church, one figurehead for the state. Because the church had done things like Peter brought some tobacco back with him from Amsterdam or whatever. Swears tobacco, right? And the church was like, no smoking. Now, of course, we think the church is kind of forward thinking because they're against something that gives you cancer, but it wasn't because it gave you cancer, it's because it was something new. And the church opposed this, this is Western, so it must be bad. This is not something that Russians should do. So Peter goes about with a program of church reforms. And he takes the patriarch, the office of patriarch. When the patriarch dies, Peter says, we're not replacing this guy, okay? I don't want a powerful figurehead, which one of these guys, was the patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church. You can't really tell because he's there with another bishop, and he's kind of like incognito. Give you a hint, though, it's the guy with the staff. But what Peter does was he replaces the patriarch with a synod. Now, a synod of bishops is a group of bishops, kind of a council that gets together. And this council of bishops, will still run things for the church, but you're not going to have this powerful patriarchal figurehead that's going to be kind of a rival to the Tsar. The church will now be a faceless institution. Can't see me. And this system kept up until 1917, which was the year of the fall of the Tsarist regime. So once this happened, once the Tsar abdicated, then the Russian Orthodox Church went back to having a patriarch, which it does still today. But from the time of Peter the Great to the fall of Tsarist Russia, there was no patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church. Another of Peter's religious policies was Christian toleration for foreigners. Now, keep in mind, if somebody was from Russia, they're going to be Orthodox, okay? He's not giving toleration to people who live in Russia, but he wanted to attract Westerners into his army and just to come over in general. So he said, look, if you're coming from Germany, I'm just fine. Lutheran church, you can come from somewhere else, Catholic church. I don't care. I'll put whatever church you want. Just come on over. But if you're Russian, you need to be Orthodox. So Christian toleration for foreigners. And then Peter has to figure out how to turn the boyars into a service nobility, meaning a nobility that has duties to the monarch, not just a nobility that's doing its own thing. And in order to do this, Peter devises a system that is known as the table of ranks. And what this table of ranks does is it creates 14 ranks of both civil and military leadership. And everybody starts at the bottom. Some get here. All right, some, he's kind of like the Drake of civil service or something like that. Start at the bottom, and if you're lucky, you're here. And this establishes the principle of meritocracy, because it really didn't matter who your daddy was, what family you came from, you're going to start at the bottom ranks. And at least in theory, you go up through the ranks based on your merit and not your family connections and that sort of thing. Peter's most famous war was the Great Northern War, which lasted for over 20 years. This is Russia versus Sweden, which Sweden was a preeminent military power in Eastern Europe at that time. Charles XII was the king of Sweden, and like Gustavus Adolphus before him, was a great warrior. And in the Battle of Narva, he defeated Peter, although he was outnumbered like 5-1. It was snowing real hard, nobody could see what was going on, and Charles triumphs in battle over Peter. Now, of course, is Peter going to go home and sulk? No. All right, when Peter the Great is sad, he stops being sad and starts being awesome instead. All right. And that's Peter, that he goes back, Battle of Poltava, Peter wins, okay? And that's really what success is about, that you don't content yourself with just sitting there and moping. You go back and you get the job done, and that's part of what made Peter so successful. I can compare him in a lot of ways to Alexander the Great. You look at any of these people that really make their marks on history, the people who get their name, the Great. And these people, a lot of times, are just complete and total egomaniacs. I mean, Alexander went around naming a bunch of cities after himself, told people that he was God. Well, somebody told him that, and he's like, hey, I'm not going to argue with that. After all, look at me, I'm Alexander. What do you want to call this city? Alexandria, just like the other 5 I've already named. Yeah, awesome. And Peter kind of goes along with the same thing. Now, of course, when it comes time for him to name his cities, like St. Petersburg, all right, that I want to name this not after myself, but after my patron saint, because I'm such a pious Orthodox Christian. Now notice, while Russians may call it Petrograd, which is, Peter's city, this is called St. Petersburg, which is more of a German word for city, but this is supposed to be Russia's window to the west. This is where Peter wants to create a brand new capital, which is going to have a more Western orientation. So keep in mind the foundation of St. Petersburg is part of Peter's overall program of Westernization, and it's right here on a warm water port. And there is a plan for the city that Peter is supervising very, very closely. In fact, Peter built himself a cabin, which is still... You could see it today. It's got this building built around it. That's on my bucket list, to go to St. Petersburg and go and look at Peter the Great's cabin. And here's somebody who's the Tsar of Russia, somebody who can live in a palace. And this is where he's living. He lived in this 3-room cabin, and he wanted this to be preserved as a reminder of his simplicity, that even though he could live in a great palace, he decides, you know what, I'm going to be right here on the front lines. I'm going to be getting stuff done, and I'm going to be personally supervising and participating in this building of my new city. And there is a monument in St. Petersburg to Peter the carpenter. This is Peter who built ships. Peter who, just like would cut heads off. Some people say, like when the Streltsy rebellion happened, that he actually beheaded some people himself. Peter who lives in a cabin and participates in the construction of his own city. Peter who was a doer. And then, of course, there's an even more awesome statue, the statue of the Bronze Horseman, which is just incredible. That's like one thing I would love is an equestrian statue. I'll probably never have enough money for it, but that's kind of my goal. It's like, yeah, Tom Richey on a horse. Yeah. And here's the population of St. Petersburg. You see that Peter started off really with nothing, and this became the largest city in Russia, or the second largest. I mean, a very large city. Let's keep it at that. Getting up to about a population of 5 million people. Now, of course, the Russian birth rate is so low that you see that the population of St. Petersburg actually decreasing. You see the effects of communism and World War II, both of those wiping out a lot of people. But the city is certainly much bigger than it was when Peter started off really with practically nothing. In 1725, Peter the Great died, but not before proclaiming the Russian Empire in 1721. And this is what really distinguishes Peter when you think about this, that Russia is not just a kingdom anymore. It's not just another country, but Peter says that this can now be called an empire. This nation, which now has a more Western orientation, okay, which now has warm water ports, this nation that has a navy, that has a flag, that Russia is now, because of Peter the Great, Russia is an empire. And this is all because of a guy who had all kinds of stuff happen to him. When he was little, had to compete with his sister in order to even become the Tsar of Russia. This guy that encountered all of these hardships, who lost battles, but instead of being sad, he chose to be awesome. And that's why I have spent the last however many minutes talking about this guy. So hopefully you find him as awesome as I do, and you have found something that can help you on some kind of exam, or just make you a less sad, more awesome person in general. And if you're wanting a little more awesomeness, please subscribe to my channel. Check out my website, tomrichey.net. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, at Tom Richey. Look for me. Like, dislike, comment, okay? And, I will see you soon. I'm out for now, but I'll be back. Until next time.